And I've been given 60 minutes. I'll stick to that. I assure you I'll take less, not more. If I'm crossing, you can stop me. I have no issues. What I did was put it in two, first topic itself in two parts. India's rich historical background. Now, knowing the way we are bound to question, so I made slight changes. Historical background would have been huge, so I did the business background. So I've taken that much of liberty. So I'm going to talk about India's rich historical business background. So the first question comes, was India rich? Yes, हमने बचपन से सुना है सोने की चिड़िया. So, but is there a more proof to it? You know, and this thought was always there with my mind as a kid. जब से सोने की चिड़िया सुना, and my dad couldn't buy a BMW, so that duality remained there. कि why? I still can't buy, is a different story. But so I said, let me look at it, India's past. We are in 2015. This small graph actually depicts the GDP contribution in the world by different countries. The red part that you see is of India from the first century. So it's a huge, almost 42%. Above India is China in gray, that is 42%, which has slowly over a period had narrowed down to 5%. And if you look at the other countries, the bottom green, which starts midway, is USA, because US didn't exist a couple of 100 years back. So it came and it captured the GDP that was ours. Looking in more detail, if you go, I'm not sure whether it's visible from there or not, but even in 1500, India's GDP contribution was 25%, UK was 1.1, US was United States of America's contribution in 1500 to the world GDP was 0.3%, which has today moved to 21.4, and India's was 21.4, which has moved to 5.4. So we were a rich country, and we lost it. So when somebody says that we are developing, we are growing, we are not developing, we are growing, we are just going to get back what was ours. We rightfully own 25 to 40% GDP, world GDP contribution. That was ours, which was taken away, and we have to reclaim it. And that's where question comes, what was right with India that we could contribute so much? And that's the question I'm going to dwell on. It's a huge quote, but basically it's been written by a person called Georges Duby. Georges Duby is one of the most famous historian on economics. He was economist, historian. And what he writes here is basically, he says in the AD 1000, in 1500, 500 years more back, in the AD 1000, Europe didn't had much food to eat always. And sometimes it used to go so bad that people used to kill each other and eat. That's called cannibalism. So not very far, I'm talking 1000 AD. So that was Europe. State of China. It is a statement by Hu Shi, was ambassador of China to India. He said that China stood like a poor beggar in front of India. And they didn't only borrow the religion, but everything, including the business practices. So that's been our contribution to the world of business. So when does it start? When did we start doing business or the industrial activity? And that's where the journey comes more interesting, and how you look at things. I'm not going to talk or share something which is very new. I'll be going to talk all the points which you will be aware of. All that I'm going to do is connect it in a different way. We all would have played games, connecting the dots in our childhood. And if you connect the dots, it used to emerge a nice picture, a human face, or an animal, or a bird, or a scenery. But if you could not connect it properly, it will give you a distorted image. So what I have tried to do is that connect those dots that we keep living day in and day out, but are not able to connect properly. So that's the journey it starts. This is the scene of Samudra Manthan at the airport in Thailand. Some of you who travel would have seen it. One of the most beautiful depiction. To me, Samudra Manthan comes across as the first recorded industrial activity. What did you found? We had power in terms of horse, elephant. You still measure power through horsepower. We had prosperity, we had health, and we had a pollution in the form of poison. So if you go back and remember the 14 things that came out of the industrial Samudra Manthan, actually our industries used to run based on those 14 things till 1800, till the invention of steam engine or electricity. You had the same horsepower, you had the elephant driving the mechanical force. So our whole economic activity, industrial activity was actually around those 14 things that came out of Samudra Manthan. One was Kamdhenu. I'm not going to talk about saving of cow and all, but this one slide is very interesting. This is the GDP distribution of New Zealand, a country which depends on dairy products. There almost 35% of contribution comes from dairy products and not the meat part of it. Just milk, butter, cheese, and that's the whole country. And you'll never hear that New Zealand never went under any kind of recession. At least in the last 20, 25 years, I haven't. While I've seen the world getting into different kind of recession at least twice. So they had a very different way of doing it. The oldest recorded industrial activity in our country goes back to Ramayana. In the Ayodhya Kand, when Bharat goes to ask Ram to come back, Bharat is being followed by head of different guilds, goldsmiths, ivory workers, jewelry workers, and they have a description of 36 guild or chamber of commerce. That's what. So they are following Bharat in an order. So it was there. And it's very important to understand at this point is that what is handicraft and what is an industry. The only thing changes between a handicraft and industry is the source of power. अगर आप हाथ से काम करते हैं तो आप लुहार हैं, आप जुल्हा हैं अगर आप हाथ से कपड़ा बुनते हैं तो. And if you apply electricity or steam engine to produce the same steel or the textile, you can be a steel magnate or a textile king. So the only difference is the source of power that you are applying. And that swift change happened somewhere in 18th century when these two things were invented. Very interestingly, across the country we say that we speak many languages. But if you go right from Kashmir to Tamil Nadu, Gujarat to Manipur, the word for industry is udyog. It's only including Sanskrit, Tamil, any language you are all must be speaking different language. The word for industry in every language is udyog. And udyog is bigger set of yoga. That's you need to be, it's a kind of yoga and that's why it's called udyog. This is a quote. It says that it's by Sutherland, it's a father, Reverian Sutherland, who had visited India, and he said that when British found, they could find everything what they can think of in the world was available in India, whether it was textile, whether it was a metallurgy, whether it was artwork, anything and everything that one can think of in this earth was manufactured in India. Now why I am talking this? Because if I say that we had a huge GDP or economic contribution, we must have had three things. We should have a product to market, we should have accounts, otherwise we can't handle that kind of GDP if we don't have, and a framework under which you operate. So on a very small nut scale, I have taken you through the products that were available and how quoted in different resources. The second part is the account part of it. And I'll give you something very interesting. Double entry bookkeeping, without which you can't think to work, was invented in India. Because we had that kind of money, we needed to record it. Otherwise, there is no need to invent that. And that's our contribution to the world of accountancy. So when you meet next time somebody in an international forum, please proudly claim that they exist because of us. The financial year, I'm sure some of you will be aware of. I don't know how many of you ask why it's April to March and not Jan to December. It is very simple. When British came to India, obviously we saw the world GDP contribution. And our new year starts right from Tamil Nadu to West Bengal to wherever you go. During April, our new year starts. So they had no choice but to follow our financial year. And hence, the financial year is March to April. British financial year is March to April. Wherever British colonized, Canada follows March to April. Malaysia follows March to April. Nigeria follows March to April. Kenya follows March to April financial year. US wanted to be different, so that's US didn't want to acknowledge that they were ruled by British ever, so they follow exactly opposite whatever British do, and hence they have a different spelling. They drive the car on the other side the way British do. So US, just to protest that they were not part of the Commonwealth, they do everything opposite of British, and we do everything to keep reminding that we were ruled by British. We do everything what they did, but this was our contribution. So wherever British ruled, 90% of those countries follow the financial year March to April. Rest of the countries in the world follow June, July or Jan, December. So again, that's the financial year was because of our GDP contribution in the world. Now you couldn't have double in bookkeeping or a financial year system unless we had a very evolved system of maths. We all know that zero was invented in India, but there is a very interesting part to it. In the world of maths, the way in history we read World War I and World War II, in the world of maths, there is something called Maths War I and Maths War II. The church refused to accept zero as a concept for almost 500 odd years. The first person who claimed zero exists was burnt. So that is, and the second again they fought for almost 300 years to accept the integral calculus, without which most of your formulas won't work today. The compound interest won't work if you don't have integral calculus. So both were invented again in India. This is something very interesting. It is important to understand that in Britain at this time, the Julian calendar, first established by the Romans, was still in force. This accounted 25th March as the first day of the new year. Therefore, the 12th January referred to in the previous paragraph was still part of the year 1696. However, the Julian calendar was proving to be very ineffective, as it actually gave an error of 11 minutes 14 seconds every year, which amounted to almost 1.5 days over 200 years. To correct this, the Gregorian calendar was adopted. The Gregorian calendar was adopted after British visited India, because our calendar accommodates both the lunar cycle and the solar cycle, and hence our calendar was far more accurate. And this time affects the bigger companies. The quote that I've just read is from the book Hand to Hand. Hand to Hand is the insurance company which celebrated its 300 years in 1996. So 300-year-old company can appreciate the value of 11 minutes, because it affects, and the most it affects is the banking and the insurance if a calendar is not proper. So that was another huge contribution. And here it comes to the point that, when you talk, most of the people say, oh, we didn't had this, we didn't had that, British came and gave it to us, which is not the case. And I'll just take example of insurance. The book that you see is Samriddha Bharatiya Bima Paddhati. Was documented by a gentleman. I think this is the last copy I could manage. And someone was selling it to Raddiwala. A friend of mine saw it in Banswara and he bought it for me and couriered to me. That's the history of this book. And this gentleman has recorded how our insurance used to work those days. The one on the left is the insurance document of a product being sent from Delhi to Amritsar, and the other is from Delhi to China. And it's in the Pali script. So we had and if you read the book, you'll find there was a whole system of insurance, And those days the product used to be taken through river. So in rainy season, you have to pay more premium because there are chances of flood. And depend on which river will get how much flood. So, and by mistake, if something fell down, then they will recover it, they will sell it at the Raddi ka bhav, and then they will deduct that price and it will be paid back to you, the balance. And there was not a single case of default in the available documents. So we had a very strong and robust insurance system, and talking 500-600 years back. So we did had. So we had all the system we know. So what was the framework on which it was working on? And that makes it more curious. And you'll find few things funny how we missed it. The culture We didn't have so-called MBA or institutes to teach, but there was a culture. It was ingrained in the culture, the business practices. And some of it we still follow without realizing the impact it has on our life today. Goddess Lakshmi, we know. But Lakshmi doesn't represent wealth, she represents more of economy. And that's why she is called Chanchal. If it sticks at one place, nothing will move. In the coming slide, you will see the bigger impact. Can you identify with anybody this picture? It's of a god. This god is Lord Kuber. You will find all the gods riding on an animal or a bird. Kuber rides on a human being and is never shown very good looking or handsome, unlike our other gods. Because Kuber represents wealth and it always is there to remind you. If you get too much bogged down by wealth, you'll start looking ugly. And that is the statement that we hear, that one picture is worth 1,000 words, is Lord Kuber's picture. So that was just conveyed so subtle. We just forgot to understand it sometime. Diwali is very interesting, you know. We worship three gods. If you remember, धन्वंतरी, हम यम देवता की भी पूजा करते हैं घरों में. आपको अगर ध्यान हो कहाँ कहाँ दिया जलता है, you will realize that. And we celebrate wealth. So wealth, health and death, all the three are worshipped, are remembered in Diwali. Today's corporate world is very worried what will happen to its CEO. We have seen a lot of CEOs collapsing because they are missing the health part. But in our ancient system, it was very well ingrained. We just started missing it. And it feels good when you nowadays find few people remembering it. Like Sunil ji writes, Swasth raho, Vyast raho, Khush raho. It was very nice interpretation, I thought, you know, of wealth, health and death. How do you transform things into contemporary words? And this is how you remember it, the ancient things, if you transfer it in the words which are more in vogue in the current world. We have a very interesting concept, you know, in India you will see that the accounts book are marked with swastik and om, and where you keep your papers also, and the tijori also. So has it got any impact? You know, I used to keep wondering. And somehow I stumbled upon a research in US. It was a very interesting finding. In a 2006 experiment in Newcastle University, UK, sorry, not US, UK, psychologists put either a picture of flowers or a pair of eyes every week near the unmanned collection box for coffee in the common room. So there the option was that you can go have coffee, there is no man to give you, but आपने एक कप कॉफ़ी लिया तो आपने वहाँ पैसे रख दिए एक कप कॉफ़ी के. सो उनका ये रियलाइजेशन था कि जब वहाँ पे आँख लगा दी गई तो 3 टाइम्स ज़्यादा लोग वहाँ अपने कॉफ़ी पीने के पैसे रखने लगे. सो दो चीज़ समझ में आई कि जब ऐसी आँखें बनी होती हैं या भगवान की मूर्ति आप शुभ लाभ लगा देते हो तो गलत काम करने से पहले झिझक होती है. If you would have seen the movie called Rocket Singh, you would have observed they have picturized it beautifully, where the hero tries to cheat somebody, but he sees the photograph of Guru Nanak, and just that moment, and he gives up the idea of cheating. So the small things have huge lessons, and the other lessons is सिर्फ भारतीय चोर नहीं होते हैं. हमें बड़ा मजा आता है अपनी बुराई करने में. It's a study in UK, and you know, most people started giving the money for coffee, but not all. So the human tendencies remains the same more or less. So the small things have bigger impact. So they were not just designed to be religious. They had a lot of other significance, and they had a lot of significance in business, and that's how they are incorporated in the business world. You would have seen this picture many times. ठेले पे या कहीं भी लोग तराजू पे सामान बेचते हैं. Have you observed a very particular behavior when the person weighs? क्योंकि आप लोग अगर मॉल जाते होंगे तो वहाँ पे 10.329 ग्राम आएगा तो यू विल बी बिल्ड फॉर 10.329 ग्राम. यू नो, बट जब आप तराजू से सामान खरीदते हैं, आज भी आप ट्राई कर लीजिएगा, वो तौलेगा, सब बराबर होगा, तो थोड़ा सा और ज़्यादा अपने से डालेगा. एंड व्हाई डिड ही डू इट? सच ए ब्यूटिफुल प्रैक्टिस विच वी नेवर अप्रिशिएट. हम उनको गालियाँ दे देंगे, रोड ब्लॉक करते हैं, ये है वो. And we'll go to mall, pay for everything, the jhola and everything. He won't give you anything free extra also, masala de dena. This guy does it, even he won't know why does it do. But हमारे डीएनए में जनरेशन से कि ये माना जाता है कि मैंने पूरी ईमानदारी से वजन किया है, बट उसके बाद भी अगर कुछ गलती रह गई होगी तो वो गलती मेरी तरफ से है और उसको भरपाई के लिए मैं थोड़ा और डालता हूँ. You won't find such a honest, you know, you won't find such honest business practice across the world. I haven't traveled, I don't have a passport, but you all must be traveling. And please come back and tell me if you've seen one. We have a rich cultural legacy of our business. And what would you call it? It's called the Hamkanta. Every Ashirwad or blessing in this country is linked with money. पैसे के भी जरूर एक आशीर्वाद मिलता है आपको, चाहे कोई भी आशीर्वाद किसी भी चीज़ के लिए दिया. इट वॉज नॉट बैड, बिजनेस वॉज नेवर नेगेटिव इन इंडिया, द वेल्थ वॉज नेवर नेगेटिव इन इंडिया. और इस देश में ज़्यादा खर्च करो तो भी लोग बोलेंगे बहुत खर्चीला है, और कम करो तो कंजूस बोला जाएगा. सो यू हैव टू हैव अ वेरी बैलेंस, एंड सोसाइटी पुट्स दिस प्रेशर ऑन यू टू रिमेन करेक्ट. एंड अनफॉर्चुनेटली बट दिस प्रेशर ऑफ बीइंग हॉनेस्ट, इसी देश में सिर्फ 10,000 रुपये न दे पाने के लिए किसान सुसाइड कर लेता है. यू नो, यहाँ बैठे कोई भी क्यों हंसी आती होगी कई बार, यार 10,000 रुपये नहीं दे पाया सुसाइड कर लिया. सो दैट्स हाउ इट इज inbuilt and ingrained. And something very interesting, Vishwakarma Puja, I don't know how many of you are aware of, but wherever factories are, plants are, it is in most of the places very important component. Few IT companies have started following it. So this is one day where Lord Vishwakarma is practiced. C.R.S.B. was a British who wrote, maybe this is the God we never had, and we could never had a good industrial relation. This is a British who wrote this. Because there's a difference in the May Day and a Vishwakarma Puja. Vishwakarma Puja में आप पूजा करते हैं and owner and the employees sit together and have food. In the Labor Day or May Day, you take holiday and go home. You don't celebrate it together. There is no occasion for bonding. And its impact is reflected when you read stories like this, which was unknown in this country for a long time, except maybe the communist part of it, is that when a labor has gone ahead and killed its owner or a manager. But now it's become one event every year or two that we come across, because these practices we have stopped. But these practices are very ingrained to this land, this culture, and if you can't work in alienation to it. So there's a very interesting part. If you ask businessmen, which few communities when you talk of businessmen come on top of mind is Sindhi, Gujarati, Marwadi, Sikh, and barring Sikh, rest of the thing people will say कंजूस होता है, and it's a very common phrase. But I don't know how many of us have realized that a good school, a good hospital, and a good temple are never sarkari. All government-run hospitals, schools, temples you won't like to go or visit or send your kids to. You'll always prefer a private one, which is run by one of these business communities. So they're not misers, they are custodian of society's wealth. I do my research, which depends on this funding from people, and I have never heard a no from anyone whom I've gone asking for. So if you are doing a business which has sense, or a work that you're doing sense, our business community always stands up and supports you. So we have, over a period, forgotten to appreciate the work, and we don't have a word for blackmail in any Indian language, because again it represents the whole cultural behavior of the country's business. We don't have a word for blackmail in any Indian language. And if you ever come to know, do let me know. I've been asking it from the last 7-8 years. Nobody has given me an answer. And this country never had a visiting card concept. And still, it doesn't hold much value. What holds much value is that you go, meet somebody and just send that so-and-so has sent me. And that just establishes all your credentials, that who has sent you or whom you know. You know, visiting cards are immaterial. In a country of 125 crores, I can print any, whatever, no one can verify it. So our business practices are very different, you know. This is a classic example of trust. In Belgium, there was a huge amount of diamond heist. Then they remembered Surat. It never happens. The whole work of diamond works on so much of trust. And the people who will never be able to earn not one but in 7 lifetimes. But you will hardly hear that somebody has run away with a diamond. The whole business roams around the trust. And you meet people who are very happy to deride our own business community कि यार हमारे यहाँ तो सब चोर हैं, कौन चोर है? मतलब for whom? We have one of the most honest businesses practices going around. And how does the small things are ingrained? ये शायद आप लोग को देख के समझ में आ रहा होगा, लूडो है, वो भारत में इन्वेंट हुआ, सांप सीढ़ी, उसको हम मोक्ष पतामू भी बोलते थे. इट्स मोर ऑफ ए जैन origin. It didn't have 1, 2, 3. It had different things, like love, trust, compassion. And so if you come into the lust, you will get a snake. If it comes to trust, you will get a ladder. You will move up. So lust was 99 and instead of 100 there was moksha. So lust is not only for sex, it could be excess desire for anything. So if you cross that, then only you go to stage of moksha. When British came, they looked at the game, they couldn't understand much. These words, moksha, was alien to them completely. So they adopted it as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it became the current form of Ludo that we see. It evolved further. It evolved into a game called Monopoly. You all heard of the game, I'm sure. Some of you would have played also. This game is the highest selling game in the world. People do PhD. There are world championship. There are guides available how to win Monopoly. And Monopoly जीतने के लिए दो चीजें बहुत जरूरी होती हैं, if you remember. One, you win when everybody is bankrupt. Correct? No one else has anything more to sell or buy. So you are the winner. And the second important component in Monopoly is that there's a part called jail. So once you land in the jail, you have two choices. One, you pay the penalty and move ahead. The second option is that you miss a chance and you remain in the jail. So what will you do if you're in the jail? Any thoughts? What will you do if you reach? So you'll pay the penalty and move out, or you will remain in the jail? Thank God somebody said pay the penalty, because I always ask this question, otherwise I find it scary. The game advises remain in the jail. Because if you come out, you will land up at the other place and you might end up paying another penalty. So it makes sense as per the game to remain in the jail. And after the last American recession, an American economist got up and said, if a Lehman Brothers CEO aspires to go to jail, we should not be surprised. If you're seeing bankruptcy all around, we should not be surprised. Because from generations, we have told our kids to play Monopoly, which teaches them that to do business, survive, you should bankrupt everybody. But if everybody else is bankrupt, how will you do business? And we have advised them, at the cost of money, it's advisable to be in the jail. And we know about Lehman Brothers, but if you go to the data, you will find amazing number of people. Close to lakhs went to the jail. So as a culture, you are groomed. Making money is more important than going to jail. So this is the kind of society you get and the business you get. So these small things, what I was talking to you, are not small. They have huge impact, which are realized, the impacts are realized over generations. To remember is that आजकल सब 100 rupees only लिखते हैं, 10,000 crore only. My dad, who writes his check in Hindi, still writes 100 rupees पूरे benefits. And Marathi, Gujarati, if you do, still पूरे was written. It was not, Fakat is a very recent adaptation. I guess we need to talk to RBI as a body and say we need to go back to the old practice. There is a whole sense of satisfaction and dissatisfaction that we are generating. Even a 10,000 crore remains only, if that doesn't give you satisfaction, you will breed a generation which will never be happy. And if you thought what I'm talking is pure nonsense, then I have a support from somebody in US. The gentleman says, ethics can't be taught in B school. Ethics cannot be taught in a business school. It has to be a part of the DNA, says David Wilson, President and CEO, Graduate Management Admission Council, GMAT. So even in there, they realize is that attending n number of conference on ethics will not give you ethics. Ethics has to come from the family, it has to come from the culture, it has to come from the childhood. And it's one of the biggest example. How many of you know that Hindustan Lever doesn't sell ice cream? What you buy in the quality is not ice cream. It is vegetable fat. And a company like Amul fought the case against them. And it's a couple of years back, and I'm sure you are not aware of it also, that if you buy a quality ice cream, it will be very clearly mentioned it's not a milk-based ice cream. It's Amul which comes out of milk-based ice cream. Hindustan Lever sells an ice cream which is based on vegetable fats. So much of ethics of a multinational, with all due respect. So, we are a generation of case studies, we need examples. So, it's a book you all must have read, or you must if you haven't. Now it's available, I guess, in 50 rupees in every language. On page 32, Mr. Kishore Biani writes, in the evening, our grandfather would give us lessons in Indian values, and the entire 13-member gang would assemble around him. Once a year, we were required to read the whole Ramayana and occasionally visit the Hanuman Mandir in Lohar Chal, none of which I particularly appreciated. So true for most of the kids. But on page 51, 52, another 20 pages down the line, he writes, those were truly trying times, but I was fortunate enough to have the unstinted support of two family members. My wife Sangeeta came with me to these exhibitions, and that was huge encouragement. And my younger brother Anil too started helping me in whatever I was doing. Anil in all ways fits into the classical definition of the younger brother. He has full faith in my ability and never hesitated to join me whenever I needed his help. Another person who has worked with me since I started is Raju. He used to help us in packaging and carrying our boxes, and till date, he continues to be my man Friday. He hasn't correlated with Ramayana, but 20 pages back, what he has read, what he has practiced, it has been paid back to him. He himself says that I've got the most ideal brother, classic definition. And in this world, the classic definition of Bharat goes to Bharat and Lakshman only. So what you read through as a childhood, it does impact you at the bigger level. Again, some more proof to what I'm trying to talk. In way back 1860, David C. MacDonald did a study. They were trying to find out what makes the kids of a particular country more entrepreneurial. And they studied everything. They studied some 120 things, the food the kids eat, the games that we play, khana jis bartan mein banta hai, the size of the bed they sleep, because they wanted to understand what brings more entrepreneurial quality in the kids. And they concluded the Indian kids have most entrepreneurial ability. And the reason was the stories that they listen in their childhood that make them more aspirational. And that's why they became entrepreneurial. And actually, if you go back and think seriously, the word entrepreneur, antaprerna se banta hai. And those stories gave you that antaprerna to become an entrepreneur. That's the etymology of the word entrepreneur. An entrepreneur doesn't mean producing a Ambani. Dhirubhai Ambani, I have immense respect. A bigger entrepreneur is the guy who thele pe saman बेचता because he handles politician, BMC, police, local goons. And he goes back, if you throw his truck, he go back and he'll lend money and come back again on the street. He doesn't have a bank to bail him out. So we are a nation of entrepreneurial ability, provided we can provide them the occasion, the basic infrastructure what we need. At the bottom of it comes is the family. Where do you learn all this? Essentially, you learn it all in the family. The family has been the so-called MBA learning place for generations in this country. And that's where comes the family managed business. Wherever British went to rule, or any part of the world which was colonized, their business didn't survive. Because if the business is in the hand of kings or the government, you just kill the king or abolish the government, the business is over. The only country which survived British onslaught, the only business which survived British onslaught was India, because in India business was in the hand of family. They couldn't go around killing families. So, in spite and despite of the colonial rule and the earlier rules, our business community survived because it was the hand of family. So that's the power of family managed business in this country, and that's where of the whole talk comes, is that we need to differentiate it from crony capitalism. Nowadays, it's being confused with crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is something very different. And our lawmakers are not able to differentiate this. And if family managed business is going to be looked as a sign of crony capitalism, then we are in big trouble. Our business is destined to be doomed. So as a nation or as a body, you all need to understand and present to the government what's the difference between crony capitalism and family managed business, because that's very necessary. Because the way the whole canard is being spread about everything about crony capitalism, we need to understand business was never a negative thing in India. It got a negative perception when British came as a businessman and started ruling. And then we had two great men who got things mixed up. Gandhi liked businessman, hated business. Nehru liked business, he hated, Nehru liked businessman, he hated business. So that misunderstanding between the two got painted a more negative picture. You know, in our generation, doing business was something, business karoge, ghar se hi sabse pehle sawal aata tha. But if business doesn't survive, we don't survive. As a nation, we don't survive. So those things need to be taken care, and as a body, we need to take care of it. And here, one shouldn't get too focused about the religion part of it, because this study I'm quoting is from US, and they had a very interesting finding. They said that the Indians are the richest lot in US of all the community coming there. And they said that their culture, I'll put it more of a religion, is because of the few things. 79% of Hindus are married, so they say that the family life helps to do much better in business. 0% Hindus had a live-in partner. 5% Hindus are divorced or less. So the conclusion was that a good family helps you make good business. So that's coming to the connect part of it. Was we had a huge business legacy. We had a very unique system how business practices were taught to us, and that has kept us going so long, almost a 15,000 years old civilization. And it's a time to take a pause, look, are we missing, or else how can we ingrain them in today's business practices and take it forward. Thank you. Thank you. Should thank the organizer that thought.
Really, I'm thanking the organizers only, not only a Chartered Accounting Institute. We are doing the WIRC chairman personally. I expect him to go to the dais and really for selecting such a type of honest service. We are all evoked us. Thank you very much, chairman of the WIRC and the whole management committee. Now my point is, sir,